The Fort Peck Indian Reservation, Assiniboine, Dakota. Wax Cur is located near Fort Peck, Montana, in the northeast part of the state. It is the home of several federally recognized bands of Assiniboine, Lakota, and Dakota peoples of Native Americans. With a total land area of 2,094,000 acres, 8,470 square kilometers, 3,272 square miles, it is the ninth largest Indian reservation in the United States. These lands are spread across parts of 4 counties. In descending order of land area, they are Roosevelt, Valley, Daniels, and Sheridan counties. Its resident population was 10,381 in 2000. The largest community on the reservation is the city of Wolf Point, 1850s, 1870s. The federal government established the Great Sioux Reservation under the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868, encompassing much of the area of West River in what is now South Dakota, as well as portions of North Dakota and Nebraska. As some bands of the Sioux agreed to come into agencies, others chose to resist. Army efforts to bring in the other Sioux, characterized as hostiles, led to battles in the Rosebud Country and culminated in the Battle of the Little Bighorn in 1876. The United States forces were roundly defeated there. As the victors dispersed, Sitting Bull led followers north into the Redwater Country. The Hunkpop assorted Teton peoples gained some supplies from contact with the Sioux at what was then known as the Fort Peck Agency. When military pressure increased in 1877, Sitting Bull led most of his followers over the border into Canada. The federal government increased its military forces in the area in an effort to induce Sitting Bull to surrender. In 1878, the Fort Peck Indian Agency was relocated to its present-day location in Poplar, Montana, because the original agency was located on a floodplain which flooded every spring. The current Camp Poplar, located at Fort Peck Agency, was established in 1880. That year, Presbyterian missionary Rev. G. W. Wood, Jr. came from northern Michigan with his family to lead the Poplar Creek Mission. Without supplies and barely tolerated by the First Nations peoples in the area of present-day southern Saskatchewan, who were dealing with limited resources, Sitting Bull returned to the United States. He surrendered at Fort Buford on July 19, 1881. Some of his Hunkpapa stragglers intermarried with other Native Americans at Fort Peck and resided in the Chelsea community. 1880s and 1890s. Edit. By 1881, the wild American bison had been hunted to near extinction by commercial hunters. By 1883 to 1884, more than 300 Assiniboine died of starvation while forcibly incarcerated at the Wolf Point subagency. Rations were insufficient, and the suffering reservation-wide was exacerbated by particularly severe winters. In 1884, Wolf Point was suffering from extreme poverty and starvation, so the Indian Rights Association convinced Congress to make a special appropriation for them. In the spring of 1884, residents built a dam to enable irrigation. From 1885 to Montana statehood in 1889, the tribes participated in agreements with the U.S. government to redrawing the Fort Peck Reservation boundaries in exchange for federal subsidies. In 1887, Congress passed the Dawes Act, which provided the general legislation for dividing the allegedly tribally owned Indian reservations into parcels of land under individual titles. Around the start of the 20th century, non-Indians continued to violate the reservation boundary areas, then encroached into the prime grazing and farmland areas within the reservation territories. As more and more homesteaders moved into the surrounding areas, pressure was placed on Congress to open up the Fort Peck Reservation to homesteading, 1900s to 1930s. Fort Peck Indian Reservation in 1917 harvesting oats. On May 30, 1908, Fort Peck Allotment Act was passed by Congress. The act called for the survey and allotment of lands now embraced by the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, and the sale and dispersal of all the surplus lands after allotment. Each eligible Indian was to receive 320 acres, 1.3 square kilometers, 0.50 square miles of grazing land in addition to some timber and irrigable land. Parcels of land were also withheld for agency, school, and church use. Land was also reserved for use by the Great Northern Railway. All lands not allotted or reserved were declared surplus and were ready to be disposed of under the homestead's general provisions, desert land, mineral, and town site laws. In 1913, approximately 134,808 acres, 5,456.81 kmr, 2,106.888 square miles of unallotted or tribal, unreserved lands were available for settlement by the non-Indian homesteaders. Although provisions were made to sell the remaining land not disposed of in the first 5 years, it was never completed. Several additional allotments were made before the 1930s. Modern. In June 2015, the Department of Interior sent offers to buy back land worth $230 million to nearly 12,000 individual owners at the Fort Peck Indian Reservation and the smaller Fort Belknap Indian Reservation. This was under the Land Buyback Program for Tribal Nations, established as part of the federal government's settlement of the landmark Cobell v. Salazar suit over federal mismanagement of revenues due Indian landowners under the trust program.